It's about what happens when we stop fighting ourselves. They say growth is about becoming better, but lately I've come to believe real growth might just be about becoming more honest. Honest with who we really are. Not just with the polished parts, our achievements, our kindness, but with the parts we hide too. The ones we don't want to admit. I used to overthink my own flaws. I'd analyze them, label them, try to trace their roots. But sometimes it's not that complicated. Sometimes the truth is in the name we give them. Bad, ugly, wrong. And once we call them that, we almost automatically go to war with them. Because that's what we've learned to do. We've trained ourselves, consciously or not, to fight, to survive. In a world that demands performance, composure, strength, and not just materially, I mean how we present ourselves emotionally, socially, psychologically. We fight to be accepted, to be seen as good, successful, put together. But here's something I never learned in school. Self-acceptance is not comfortable. In fact, it can feel heavy. Even heavier when you're also carrying the expectations of others, your family, your partner, your friends, your culture. And that's what we don't talk about enough. How layered this all is, how deeply psychological and societal it becomes. We don't just wrestle with what feels wrong inside us, we wrestle with the pressure to appear like we're doing just fine. Over time, we become so good at performing strength, we forget how soft and breakable we actually are. We're taught to look strong, to be masculine, to be resilient, to keep pushing, succeeding, providing, producing. But in doing so, we often stop being fair to ourselves. We stop admitting that those so-called bad parts of us are real. And when they show up, instead of listening, we try to shut them down. We suppress, we numb, we silence, and the cycle repeats. It's like the yin-yang symbol in Eastern philosophy, light and dark, each holding a part of the other. But we keep trying to erase one side of ourselves, thinking that will bring peace. It doesn't. It only adds more tension. And when the pressure builds too high, we snap, we lash out, or we numb out with substances, distractions, or self-isolation. We wear ourselves down, because in trying to kill the bad, we're actually attacking ourselves. That's why this story matters to me. Because one day, I stopped trying to fix myself and started having a conversation instead. A conversation with the parts of me I'd spent years trying to silence. And maybe, just maybe, that's where healing really begins. Everything began on a perfectly ordinary afternoon. I was sitting alone in a small park, watching the children laugh as they chased soap bubbles. The sun was gentle, and the breeze carried the fading scent of late summer. Everything outside felt peaceful, but inside me a storm was brewing. Just a few days earlier, I had snapped at someone I loved over something small, trivial. But it wasn't the first time. And though I didn't want to admit it, it had become a pattern. That familiar guilt returned. It sat heavy on my chest, like a soaked raincoat I couldn't take off. I had spent years trying to be better. Therapy, journaling, self-help books. I knew all the right terms. Self-awareness, mindfulness, childhood wounds. I thought I had fixed myself, but there were still days I got angry for no reason. Felt jealous, acted from fear instead of love. And each time it happened, I'd fall into the same old trap. Blame myself, swear it would never happen again, and try harder to become some perfect version of me. But that day, something shifted. I saw a little boy crying because he had dropped his balloon. Instead of scolding him, his father gently picked him up and held him close. No blame, no lecture, just an embrace. That child wasn't punished for being vulnerable. He wasn't told to grow up. He was simply held, accepted, even in his messiness. And I wondered, what about me? What if the ugly parts of me didn't need to be erased, but listened to? That thought stayed with me. In the weeks that followed, I started to sit with the parts of myself I had always hated. Not as enemies, but like long-lost friends I had forgotten to love. I listened to the angry voice inside me. It whispered, I feel unseen. I listened to the jealousy. It said, I'm afraid I'll never be enough. I listened to the silence of my wounded parts. It murmured, I just want to feel safe. None of these were bad, they were hurt. And I realized these bad habits weren't failures. They were pains that had never been met with compassion. So I tried something different. Instead of rejecting them, I sat beside them. Instead of hiding them, I shared them with people I trusted. Instead of trying to fix myself, I began to care for myself. It wasn't dramatic. There was no grand breakthrough, just small moments where I allowed myself to be human. I still make mistakes, still get jealous, still get defensive sometimes, but now I don't run. I take a breath, I listen, and I remind myself, I'm not perfect, but I'm still worthy of love. We often believe that to love ourselves we have to change ourselves, but maybe real love begins the moment we stop changing and start understanding. I am not the perfect version of myself I once dreamed of, but I am real. And real is enough. The question is no longer, how do I eliminate my flaws, but rather, how do I live with them, kindly, clearly, without letting them define me? Because wholeness isn't perfection, it's harmony. We often believe that if we have enough willpower, enough reason, we can conquer every dark corner within ourselves. But the truth is not that simple. What we call the bad parts of us are sometimes just the ways we've learned to respond after being hurt for too long. They are the layers we've built just to survive. They are part of a delicate process of existing, one that balances countless psychological, social, emotional, and cultural pressures. That's why accepting ourselves has never been easy. And it becomes even harder when you live in a society that constantly expects you to toughen up, to be strong, to be successful, to be fine. But sometimes you don't need to be strong. You just need to be honest with yourself. Understand this. The story you just heard about a middle-aged man struggling with his bad habits and slowly learning to accept himself is just one small slice of a much larger truth. Out there are countless other stories, each with their own paths, their own pain, their own healing. I share this with one simple message. Understand yourself. Be kind to yourself. Don't be unfair to yourself, because if you keep treating the bad parts of you as enemies, you will live in an endless war. Some people suppress. Some people run away. Some turn to medication or destructive habits to fill the void. But all of that only wears you down. Instead of trying to destroy it, learn to sit with it. Listen. Talk to yourself as you would to a friend. And maybe, just maybe, you'll discover that even in your darkest parts, there is something still longing to be loved. Once you've learned to live with the darker parts of yourself, you realize that's not the end of the journey. It's the beginning of something deeper. You begin to ask, can I do more than just coexist with my flaws? And slowly you understand, yes, you can. Not by fighting the darkness, but by planting light within it. Like lighting a small candle in a shadowy room. The darkness doesn't vanish, but now you can see. You can breathe. So you begin inserting goodness, not to erase what's broken, but to hold it with kindness. Maybe it's 10 quiet minutes in the morning. Maybe it's offering forgiveness when it's hard. Maybe it's a soft thank you, or a text that says, I'm here. You're not trying to become perfect overnight. You're just learning to treat yourself like someone worth caring for. And little by little you start to see what once felt like shameful parts of you. Your anger, your judgment, your silence were never just bad. They were wounds, and now they're becoming wisdom. You realize you lashed out because you were afraid. You judged because you didn't feel safe. You hid because you were longing to be seen. They're no longer enemies. They're milestones, signs of where you've been and how far you've come. And that is what the next story is about. A story of learning how to plant light inside the shadows, how to grow something beautiful right from the places you once wanted to destroy. Are you ready?